Today's short lesson is introducing passive transport. Now that we've looked at the structure of the cell membrane, we can start to talk about the things that it can do. We know that the cell membrane for human cells is a selectively permeable membrane, meaning it only allows certain things to move in or out, mostly based on its structure, the lipid structure that we've discussed. There's two different categories of transport, and what we're going to talk about today is called passive transport. Passive transport uses no energy. There's no ATP necessary for these things to happen. Usually, things are moving from an area of higher concentration towards an area of lower concentration, and generally they will move until it's equal on both sides. We say that it's moving down its concentration gradient. It's going from where there's more towards where there's less. So if you envision this as a slide, it's going down. That's very simple, that's very easy, and again, no energy is needed. What are the things that can affect passive transport? Well, one of the things is the distance. How far does something have to travel? The temperature. The warmer it is, the faster this will generally happen. How steep that concentration gradient is. If it's not very steep, or if it's really steep, that's going to affect, again, like a slide that's only, this is the top and this is the bottom, it's going to be a pretty slow slide. But a slide where this is the top and this is the bottom, you're going to move a lot faster, okay? And then also the size of the molecule. Small molecules tend to move faster. They're bouncing around, they're moving a lot more, a lot of kinetic energy. And then also that membrane is going to have some effect, and that's the chemistry of the membrane and the chemistry of the thing that is moving. So we divide passive transport into two major categories. One is diffusion. So what we just described, something moving from high to low concentration until they're equal, is the definition of simple diffusion. And in diffusion, it's the solute. It's whatever it is that's dissolved, or it's the particle, or it's the ion, or it's the gas that is going to be moving, okay? When we have a solution, when we have a fluid and we have the stuff that's dissolved in it, diffusion is that solute. It's the sugar dissolving and spreading through the coffee. It's the air freshener spreading through the air. It's the ions on either side of a cell membrane that are going to be moving back and forth. We also have our other major category is filtration. And when we start talking about filtration, we start talking not about concentration, we really start talking more about water pressure, or the big term for that would be hydrostatic pressure, okay? In this case, you want to think of like a coffee filter, or maybe your strainer for pasta, where you put your coffee grounds and then you pass your water through, or you put your pasta and the pasta stays behind and the fluid moves through. When we think of filtration, what's happening is it's the water pressure that's forcing this separation of solids and liquids. But instead of gravity affecting it like this, think of it more like side to side. Water is pushing through, and so the harder the water is pushing, high to low pressure, water pressure, that's going to separate our solids from our liquids. Now, under the category of diffusion, we have a couple different things we can separate there as well. Diffusion can happen on its own if a molecule is small, if it's nonpolar, because that deals with the chemistry of the membrane. But there are larger things that are going to have to move. And in those cases, we use facilitated diffusion. All that means is that there's a protein channel or a protein carrier that is going to allow that larger item to move from one side of the membrane to the other. And there's a lot of characteristics that come into those, and we'll get into those more later as we talk about specific things. Again, remember, facilitated diffusion is still passive. There's no energy needed for those things to move across the membrane. The last kind of subsection of diffusion is a special case called osmosis. And osmosis deserves its own video, so we'll go there as well, okay? But osmosis is where not the solute that's moving, it is the water that's moving. So the definition of osmosis is diffusion of water through a semi-permeable membrane. So now it's not the ions moving across. It's not the stuff, if you will, that's moving. It's the water that's actually moving across the membrane, because water in this case would be the only thing that could move across the membrane. So diffusion of water across a semi-permeable membrane, meaning water is going from where there's a higher concentration of water towards where there's a lower concentration of water. And we have more terms to discuss with that as well. So that's another video, that's another topic, but that gives us our basics for passive transport. Okay, so what's passive transport? It requires no energy. Okay, it's either in the family of diffusion, which is something moving from high to low concentration, or it's filtration, which is moving water pressure is driving it as opposed to the solute concentration. All right, so that's our passive transport, no energy. So we're going to have another video that will cover osmosis, because that's kind of a special case and there's a lot that goes with that. And then we'll move on to active transport and talk about where we need energy to drive the movement of items.